Okay, so Fred, you know, thinking about journals.
Yeah.
I know you're the editor-in-chief of JMACL.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been editor of other journals? Or what's the story? How did you get Penn State?
So this is my very first one.
Okay.
And it came from a conversation that I had with the previous president, prior president,
Okay.
President Ruth Simmons.
Okay.
And she was saying, you know, we want a good way to ground your center. And she said the best way you can ground a center is to have an academic journal.
Okay.
So having academic presence in a journal gives you that presence.
Okay.
So I was thinking, you know, well, let me figure out where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. And she said, well, I want you to have this journal with an academic press.
Okay.
So
that's one thing that I want to talk to you about, because you also edit a book series with Routledge, and one thing that I've heard you always say to folks coming up is always have academic. It has to be rigorous.
It does.
It's serious. It's serious work.
So
it seems like obviously all journals aren't the same, but JMACL, it's peer reviewed. It's sponsored by academic press, AAU, so and then grounding. Okay, so what was the process? How did you get the journal?
So I actually spent time working on a proposal. So there are certain questions, certain elements that they want you to respond to. So, you know, how often the journal going to come out? You know, what's going to be the focus? What's going to be the scope? What's the mission? So a lot of different things. Who's the audience? So I just spent time, I actually spent an entire summer working on the proposal.
Okay.
To pull it together.
Okay.
So finished that proposal, and then I started to shop it.
Okay.
And since I had the words from the president saying, you know, shop it with an academic press, institutional press, so I sent it to Michigan State, Penn State, Fordham, SUNY, Texas A&M Press, UT Press, so on and on and on and on. And it came down to truly looking at what presses, all of them were great, but what presses were going to give me like the most support, because new journal, new to the game, so I really wanted to have a lot of support. And that was Michigan State and it was Penn State.
Okay.
And when I had a conversation with the folks at Penn State, not only were they going to provide the support, they actually wanted the journal.
Okay.
They said, this particular journal, we were looking at a focus. So it's minority achievement, creativity, and leadership. So they said, we have been looking for a journal that kind of pulled together all of those elements. So this would be perfect.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what made me decide on Penn State.
So is it like a book proposal? Because, you know, for not everyone knows the process. It's clear that you did a lot of thinking, thoughtful, creative work over the summer. But is it like a book proposal? Like who reviews your proposal? In other words, for like Penn State, who reviewed it at Penn State?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure of his title, but I'm going to say the director of the Penn State Press at the time.
Okay.
Patrick Alexander.
Okay.
He was the one that actually sent me very, very similar to a book proposal, but he sent like a series of questions, which were very, very much aligned to what you would typically see in a proposal, putting together a book proposal. So again, I had to respond to questions like, you know, who's the audience? How often do you plan on the journal coming out? You know, where will it be housed? Also looking at, you know, who will be your reviewers? You know, all of the standard fare.
Okay.
So I just spent an entire summer working on that proposal.
And how does, is there money involved? Like, who Penn State accepts the proposal, or is there any money that you have to pay, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So Penn State, they review the proposal is accepted, and then of course all of the administrative, the lawyers get involved to draw up a contract, and then the contract, it really depends on how the contract is constituted. So the particular contract that I have for JMACL is with Prairie View A&M University, not Fred Bonner.
Okay.
And when I learned the process, I understood from them that, you know, we connect a journal. It's best to connect it to an institution and not a person, because professors move, you know,
Correct.
in 2 years, in a year, 3 years. So, and you want the journal to be in a stable place.
Sure.
So the contract that I signed, The contract is with JMACL, Penn State Press, and Prairie View.
Okay.
And I'm the founding editor.
Okay, founding editor.
Right.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So, anything, you're at a place in your career, full professor, endowed, regent professor. You're a scholar of scholars. Would you say that, that's the appropriate time to be looking into editing a journal, starting a journal, like a pre-tenure assistant professor? They shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
And why is that the case?
So I think the timing piece, as you mentioned, is really important. So I actually have this session that I conduct to help faculty, tenure track faculty, junior faculty, all the way to full professors, to help them understand the landscape of academia, particularly if you want to have the professor life, what you do. So in that particular presentation, I talk about how it's important to understand the rules of engagement. If you look at your faculty career as divided into two phases, phase one, from the beginning to getting tenure, during that assistant professor phase, you're really supposed to be showing that you can do engaged research, peer-reviewed research, rigorous research, and you're trying to show that you have an individual and a collaborative research agenda. So at that time, you're doing things like writing journal articles, getting out publications, doing the book chapters, trying to get your numbers up. Once you get tenure, once you become an associate professor, so from associate professor to full professor and beyond, you're no longer trying to prove that you can do effective research or that you're trying to establish a research agenda. Your research agenda is established, and now you're trying to show that you have a national, international presence, and that you can actually draw funding, and that you can do all these things that are more aligned with being a seasoned professor. So that is a time when you're not necessarily doing like the journal articles or trying to crank out 1,000 articles in that first phase. In the second phase, you're trying to show that you have some gravitas in the field. And the way you do that is not necessarily cranking out 1,000 journal articles, it's doing books, book chapters, being invited to serve on boards, getting grants. So all those senior professor things. And one of those senior professor things is becoming an editor of a journal, getting your own journal. So doing those things that show that you have some, it's not about trying to establish a name, it's about trying to show that your name means something.
And so let's talk about let me take that a step further. You're the editor-in-chief. Do you view it as, is it service or is it also scholarly in the sense that you get to pull together maybe a special issue, or you could desk reject certain things because you know the aims and scope of JMACL, but you also see this cutting edge research being done, and you can help shape the that body. So how do you frame and come to this work as an editor now, full professor? How do you view it?
So I see this role is I live in the trio, and the trio being teaching, research, and service. So I think living in the trio, I need to create opportunities for folks to actually capitalize on each one of those things. So the journal actually, it gives me and it gives others an opportunity to capitalize on their research. You get to showcase what you're doing. You get to bring scholars together who are doing cutting edge things. You get to, I get to do some service. I get to go out and cultivate, these scholars and bring them into the journal and give them opportunities. So I get to serve on the editorial board, or to, help direct the editorial board. And at the end of the day, all of it is about, the good teaching, bringing that good teaching into a place and space that can actually be put into print, can be put into paper. So many of the things that we do from our teaching translates to the printed page. And where can we house those things? Where can we showcase those things? In our academic journals. So I think that being the editor of this journal gives me the opportunity to kind of galvanize the teaching, the research, and the service. I mean, that trio kind of rules our life. I mean, that is the benchmark and the foundation of academia. I think this journal gives me the opportunity to capitalize on that.
Okay, that makes sense. So you talked about, this is your major first time as an editor. Would you say then for assistant professors, who have big aspirations, maybe to be a book review editor, something that, you know, nothing major, but you can get some experience on how journal management systems work or anything like that? Or
That's exactly it.
okay.
I would encourage junior professors, those that are just starting, serve as a reviewer. As an editor and you as co-managing editor, you know that we always have problems trying to find reviewers. And that's not just JMACL, that is every journal that I've been associated with, that I've served on editorial boards, we're always looking for reviewers. So those junior faculty, serve as a reviewer, learn the process, learn the management systems, you know, figure out, you know, find out ways to recruit other people to come in and to serve as reviewers. So there's so many things you can do. And heck, review, you know, review those articles, you know, get a true baseline understanding of qualitative research, quantitative research, mixed methods research, you know, get to understand those very avant-garde qualitative theoretical approaches, you know, get to understand, you know, this person is using phenomenology or ethnomethodology, you know, get to understand this person doing, you know, canonical analysis, you know, doing structural equation modeling. So you get that stuff from serving as a reviewer. So at any point in your career, whether you're a seasoned faculty member towards the career sunset twilight, there are things that you can do by helping to marshal those who are coming along to understand the process. If you're mid-career, maybe you're at the point now where you've gotten tenure, you can serve as more of like a workhorse. So let me move some things along. I've gotten tenure, so I don't have that great club over me trying to crank out all these articles. And I'm not quite at the point where I have to truly worry about doing all the seasoned scholar thing. So in this middle tier, let me serve as a workhorse and really get some things going. And again, those at the very, very beginning, reviewer, workhorse things in the middle, seasoned professors, help pull together the folks, the masses, to get them to understand what the overall process looks like.
I very much think about something you've said. Maybe we can sit down here and talk more. I think of what you said is this idea of learning by doing, but understanding where are you in this, as you mentioned, kind of career trajectory. Mm-hmm. So there are certain things that assistant professors, associate professors, full professors may or may not be doing, and understanding at where are you at this point of time in your career, and what actions and what learnings are you doing. I very much appreciated being brought into JMACL because of two things you mentioned: the rigor and the quality of the journal, mm-hmm. the peer-reviewed nature of it, and the backing of Penn State University. I was associated with other journals, but I've learned so much. So thinking about that, when you thought about editing a journal, you had that conversation with your president, and she gave you some thoughts about anchoring it with an academic press. How long did it take from that moment to actually being successful, having a website, having your name editor? Like, how much time did that take?
It's definitely a process.
Okay.
It's a process. It took me about a year to pull the proposal together. So this was even before I started shopping anything, just to truly sit down and to think through, respond to all of those questions, to really be intentional about every aspect of the journal. I mean, you really have to give them a global perspective of what you want to do, but then you have to also get into the weeds. I mean, all of the technical stuff, you know. Should this come out once a year? Should it come out quarterly? Mm-hmm. So there are so many things that went into it. And that took me about a year.
Okay.
And subsequent to that year, this whole process of, so you get the journal, but that's only step one. Step two, you got to start building the journal. And one of the things that you have to do, on the front end, I tried to do some things that would serve as kind of like a force field, a shield of academic excellence. So the first thing that I tried to do, you mentioned this, is that I wanted it to be with an academic press at an AAU institution. So at least that, I thought, would serve as somewhat of a barrier from some of the issues and problems that scholars can sometimes have with publishing in new journals. one of the things that you want to do when you're building is to get indexed, because that is when you start to get all the recognitions, you start to impact factor, all those things that matter for tenure and promotion. So, and I knew there was going to be a gap, there was going to be a time, because it's a new journal, to get to that place. So I wanted folks to be able to fall back on something that could say these were markers of quality.
Yeah.
And those markers were AAU, Penn State, being at an academic institution, that's where the journal is housed, in the space and time that it took to, and we're still getting there, so we're just about at the point to become indexed.
Okay.
So those were some of the things that I had to think about. And once we're indexed, then we move into that place and space where all of those boxes that we need to check by way of like academic prowess of your journal.
Well, and you touched on something. It seems like there's never been, and I know you're much more senior than I, but at least in my career in higher education, there's never been a more challenging time to secure reviewers. You know, and in my understanding, right, that's part of being a professor. You have to review, and reviewing is a form of service, but to your point, you learn so much. You can read and be exposed to theories and approaches and just good writing, sometimes bad writing, but you know, it's a learning process. So in your experience, why is it so challenging during this time, this period of time, of finding reviewers? It seems like everyone is tapped out, burnt out. We submit, we send out, hey, review it. Will you review it? Will you review it? Is that going to improve, do you think, over time, or?
You know, we live in a time of scarce resources. And I think when you look at the resources, you have faculty members who are doing a whole bunch with a lot less.
Yeah.
So, and when we want to privilege and we want to recognize particular populations to serve as reviewers, particularly those who are in our minority serving institutions, our HBCUs, our ANAPCs, and our HSIs, it gets difficult because many times those institutions, because of a lack of resources or resources that are not commensurate with their peers, their Research One peers, so sometimes those faculty members, it's like a ripple effect. So because there are scarcer resources, it translates to faculty who have to perhaps teach more classes. They have to advise more students. They have more service commitments. So that reduces the time that they could just spend on academic engagements. Engagements like reviewing for a journal. And even in our institutions that are prosperous, that have the resources, folks are still pulled very, very thin. So when we look at this age of lack of resources, looking at faculty who have all these competing agendas, folks just, you know, reviewing for a journal, sometimes, unfortunately, it becomes like the last thing on the list.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing is, you know, I always, when I learn things from you and other scholars who I respect and admire and am inspired by, I immediately use them. And I remember when you reviewed dissertations, and I think you dog-eared the corner, you know, and stuff like that. Tell me your thoughts just around the quality of reviewing, right? Because to review a paper takes a lot of time, a lot of thoughtfulness to read, to give productive feedback. And so is that something that you see kind of from your vantage point, the junior faculty, early career faculty, they're not being taught in their doctoral programs, or they're not acquiring those skills of what makes a good review, like how to do a peer review? Is that something that you see? Any advice to those people?
You know, I really credit being a good reviewer to the fact that I was a really good mentee. Nowadays, the whole mentoring mentee thing, in the age of, you know, fast turnover, fast turnaround, it just seems like there's like a different respect or reverence for mentoring. I was one that always listened to my mentors. I listened, I watched, I learned. So I truly learned how to become a good reviewer I learned how to write strong letters for tenure and promotion. So I get called on a lot to do tenure and promotion letters. So a lot of my writing came from me watching the masters and not rushing the process, spending the time, not thinking I knew it all. So I was one that I could always be coached.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. I think maybe some of this is being a Generation Xer. So don't spend a lot of time telling me what I did right or what's good or this is glowing, this is great. I'm here to learn, so tell me, I'm okay with you jumping in to tell me the stuff that some might perceive as negative. I want to learn. So I listen. So I can remember my colleague, Betty Merchant. She was the dean when I was there at UT San Antonio. And I can remember like one of the organizations, UCEA, they actually sent her an award, a letter saying that over the years, they wanted to recognize her great work that she had done for all those years as a reviewer.
Okay, gotcha.
And how folks really respected her reviews. How she had an uncanny way of being able to give you this really, really deep feedback and also to give you support to say this is what you need to do to pull it all together. So I watched her in her reviews. I watched her in writing her letters of tenure, promotion. So me just spending the time and listening and being a good listener, so there's this old statement a lot of older African Americans would say, can't nobody tell you nothing. Well, people could tell me something and I would listen.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.